Okay, welcome back to The Missing Link, another part of the what we're calling the Whiteline episode. There's been a lot that's come out of this and a big learning curve, I think, for industry on what can happen, which is what we're trying to bring forward to everybody. We've had Steve on here a couple of times now discussing what happened from his point of view there. But I know, Sharon, that thanks for coming back. We know that you have done a lot with industry as a result of what you went through. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that and what you've done, and I know that you've had the help with SARTA. But I remember running into you after we did the Copy Southbound podcast, and you said to me that you're making it your life's mission now to get out there and make sure that no one else goes through what you did again, because of how draining it was mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, and all of those things to you and Bob, which I just can't imagine to think what you went through. So I just thought it'd be nice if you could have a bit of discussion about that and some of the things that you've learned and what you've seen and whatever else you want to discuss.
Yeah, look, thanks, Bruce. I mean, obviously, unless you've been through something like that, you don't realise how harrowing it can be when there's any kind of investigation. And so what you later think about is what are the sorts of things you need to put in place to protect yourself better. Might necessarily be things that you think are going to deliver better safety outcomes, but in investigations it becomes about being able to prove your position and, you know, what you do and how you do it and how you achieve what you achieve.
Yeah.
So I would say what I say to people since is, look, just think about the kind of things if you had to provide information. How would you do that? Where would you source it from? Where would you get it from? Can you account for every single turning moment that truck is turning a wheel? Like, for instance, in our situation, we have trucks that are designated to specific runs. Then in between those specific runs, they get fueled, they go down for warranty work, for servicing work. They might move a trailer around in the depot, or so the truck is actually maybe actively moving. So you need to be able to account for every single kilometre and every single operating moment that truck
and
is
that's
actually.
A tough thing, because when a driver's got down, work and rest, well, all of that's regarded as work. So they're going to, I presume they're going to look at a tracker and say, well, hang on, that truck was moving there, and you're there scrambling, thinking, what was it doing? Oh, it actually went in for a service. But you need to have that noted so you can find it straight away, don't you?
Yeah, you need to be able to show that the mechanic or the local driver, whoever it was, actually took that truck from the depot down to the repairer and back again. Because sometimes that can be, depending who the repairer is, that could account for, 20, 30, 40 Ks. So in the absence of being able to prove that, you can have allegations made to you that that the actual line haul driver was the one that was actually doing that work.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Especially when the authorities understand that a particular business is one man, one truck. The assumption they'll make is if that truck moves, that man was in that truck. And it's just one of the risks for people is all the assumptions that authorities make, particularly investigators who are not what I would consider highly competent. Because a competent investigator, as you'd hear from Paul Alsbury, they have an open mind. And he said to me before, and he'll probably say something similar to you, that the purpose of an investigation isn't to nail somebody, it's to find out whether or not something happened, and whether or not it's significant enough or a problem that warrants a fine, a penalty, or prosecution. That's an open-minded investigator. Well, not all investigators are open-minded. Some of them are very close-minded, and they will just assume stuff. And you've got to be able to, as Sharon's saying, you've got to be able to prove what was happening, and that comes down to the telemetry technology as well.
Well, it's proving what wasn't happening.
Yes.
So if they're turning around and saying, well, that truck was moving there, why was that? Oh, our mechanic took it. well, I actually think it was your driver. No, it wasn't. Well, prove it. And you want to be able to turn around and say, well, you prove it, but you don't get the chance to do that. You prove that we were doing the wrong thing.
Well, in court, the lawyers will tell you all the time that the prosecutors have to prove their case. But you're a fool if you go into court not prepared to prove your defence, right?
Yeah, okay, yeah, good call.
The courts do expect the prosecutor to establish their case. But sometimes they'll try and establish it with really shallow, slack evidence. And if you can't counter that, other than just claiming something, because then it becomes your word against an officer's word, right? And that's never going to go well for you. And there's a hidden issue in here in relation to telemetry, because there'd be, as Sharon and I have talked about quite often, there'd be a lot of people out there with some form of telemetry in their truck, which they may or may not be using in any way at all. But it's there.
So you're talking like a telematics that's come with the
Yes.
truck from factory, that type of thing.
Yeah. And depending on if that's a manufacturer's telemetry system, and I suspect they're all ramping up the standard of their telemetry systems, partly as a result of the Whiteline case and all the hoo-ha that was created when telemetry providers were required to provide data, right? And if the telemetry system is not high grade, if it only uses 2 or 3 satellites, not 8 satellites, then, and if the system itself is not certified and with 100% integrity, there's a real risk that the quality of the data and the reporting systems and the management of the data will leave the operator open to misinterpretation by the investigating officers. So it's a case of either have no telemetry at all or have really good high-grade telemetry and use it yourself, see what it's telling you.
Yeah, look, I think in this day and age you can't afford not to have the high-grade telemetry that you're talking about, because the telemetry, if it's not high grade, for instance, won't decipher when a truck is actually on a short rest break and idle. There's the reports that you're able to get through the high grade telemetry absolutely makes it clear when the truck is stationary, between what hours it's stationary, time frames. So you're able to cross-reference all of that sort of thing off work diaries. There are and look, you know, you got to bear in mind that the problem that I was dealing with was back in 2020, and telemetry and the reporting and what it can all do now has come a hell of a long way. The fatigue management side of things now, you can actually buy units where the GPS element of that is of a higher grade. But back in the day when I installed telemetry, the very first thing I installed was Seeing Eye, because I was serious about driver safety.
Yeah.
So I thought, Seeing Eye, this is about if the driver is doughy, tired, this is the way to go.
Especially on that run.
Yep.
And especially driving a European truck as well, which is just so comfortable. And I go home and sit in the lounge, well, I start to nod off immediately. And that's what's going to happen with those guys if they get a little bit doughy.
Yep.
Those C machines are absolutely phenomenal.
Well, the good thing about them as well is that even though there can be a lag when we might get the alert back at head office, the driver absolutely gets the alert. You know, the whistles and bells go off, the seat vibrates, and that's what you want. You want that to be dealt with there and then.
How many close calls have you seen with those?
Look, I would say, you know, you get situations where you show a driver and you'll sit them down and you'll show them the footage and you'll say, look, what do you reckon here? You know, do you think you were getting a bit tired, you know, towards the end of a shift? I mean, I think it's been an invaluable tool for training and alerting drivers to what they look like at different stages on their journey, and how they do their journey. You know, for instance, with the run that we do, most of the drivers, if they've had a good run from Adelaide, they'll get to Mundrabilla and that's where they have their long break.
Yeah, right.
And before they get to Mundrabilla, they've got to stop at the checkpoint. And, you know, I'll always say to them, well, look, you know, if you're feeling a little bit doughy, you've still got that extra hour. So get out, walk around, freshen up, have a look at things, and prepare yourself for the last part of the journey. I mean, it all gets down to what did they do before they went on the journey? How prepared were they before they went? You know, they got declarations and they signed that they've had the sufficient rest and all of that kind of thing in preparation for their trip.
Yeah.
Did they develop a migraine through the day or a cold, or, you know, has something happened to them mid-trip that has impacted how they feel? So, look, we have used the Seeing Eye for lots of training and development. Sometimes people are in denial about how they felt, so it's good to be able to show the footage and actually demonstrate to them and show them.
People have a microslip, they don't realise that they've had a microslip.
That's right.
Obviously, it's very good for distraction, all of these things, but it does get down to the reporting. Like, it takes a while to finesse how you want the reports, the frequency you want the reports, what the reports will show you. Yeah. And again, from 5 years ago to now, the reporting is at a different level now. You know, there's a lot greater detail in the reporting available now to back then. But for me, Bruce, that when I bought it, it was about, well, what can I do that will deliver a safety outcome? It was a big investment. I had no pressure about putting it in. I wasn't demanded to put it in. It wasn't in regulations I had to have it in. It was a conscious decision I made to install it. Then, I mean, as it would turn out, it would very much work against me when it was being, you know, misused. So
because the GPS system built into that Seeing Eye technology at that time, back then, also wasn't at a level that was designed for high integrity, pinpoint location, time tracking, right? Because the purpose of it was to know roughly where the truck is, but it's a fatigue management system, not a heavy vehicle driver work rest hours tracking and monitoring system. But now I think a number of the telemetry providers heard about, some of them were shocked and horrified about the Whiteline thing and the way the South Australian Police were demanding data that required reports that didn't exist to have to be generated by the telemetry providers at substantial expense to those providers, and the police weren't paying them anything. And I remember one of them actually fronting up in court to give evidence as part of the prosecution case. And when he'd finished, as he was getting out of the witness stand, he turned to the judge and said, "Oh, Your Honour, look, this has all cost me a lot of money to generate all of these reports. You know, who's going to pay me for that?" And the magistrate looked at him and said, "Well, mate, you can make an application if you like and see how you go." But the point is, the police, without any care at all about the impact on the telemetry provider, demanded all this stuff. Ironically, learnt in the process that the reports that they needed didn't previously exist, and yet earlier they had demanded that Sharon be using that same technology to monitor comprehensively drivers' compliance. It just wasn't possible. So, you know, and a lot shifted because the telemetry providers were all talking to each other, and they're all horrified because there are questions like, you know, Sharon legitimately and other operators have said, "Well, hang on, whose data is it? You're going to tell me if you get asked to produce stuff for the police? I mean, what rights have I got? Whose data is it?" There are a lot of legal questions in there, and it made the telemetry providers have a good hard look at themselves in terms of the standard of the GPS system and how they manage the data, and whether or not they would or wouldn't inform the truck operator that they've just provided their data. And then you say, "Well, we want a copy." "Well, what do you want?" "I want exactly what you gave the police, thanks very much." Well, who's going to pay for that? You know, it was pretty messy, wasn't it?
I couldn't even get that because the police had access to just download files.
Yes.
So we never really knew what the police had downloaded. But the sad thing about all of it is, and, you know, I feel bad for all the providers too, because everybody created their, their systems for a purpose, whether it be the maintenance and running of the vehicle, or whether it be the managing fatigue of a particular driver. I don't think anyone ever thought when they were creating these things that it was going to go to this other level. And I think it's probably really stopped a lot of operators putting in the safety system, because they don't want to be in a position where they're exposed. And like when I first put in Seeing Eye, I had quite a bit of opposition from different drivers. I had one that had been with us 11 years leave over it, because he felt like he was being watched all the time, as opposed to it being there to protect him if he had a moment. So, there was no reward in the sense that taking that initiative was positive for me. I had to put up with all the politics of installing it and getting everybody over the line with it, and then the authorities tried to burn us with it. So there was even a piece of footage that one of the police officers grabbed that showed the driver more to the centre line. Well, those of us that do remote and rural Australia will know often if there's nothing coming for kilometres and the shoulders are all broken up and the road's in terrible condition, there's no need for you to be bouncing around your tyres on, when you can move off that.
For sure.
But that was deemed to be me encouraging, reckless or dangerous driving, as opposed to...
Which is as ridiculous as using safety cam to spot that a truck is over the centre line or too close to the fault line and sending them a fine in the mail because you can. There's a huge irony. So SAPOL used those systems and data from it to have a crack at the company. And yet when I've had conversations with SAPOL, including very senior SAPOL people about Guardian, the response has been, well, we don't support Guardian, or the Seeing Eye, we don't support that stuff. Why not? Well, it only works when there are symptoms of fatigue. So, you shouldn't even need it. You should be managing things so that never happens. Now, that is incredibly naive. But my response to them was, well, why haven't you taken all the airbags out of your patrol cars? And the senior guy said, what do you mean? I said, they never go off until you crash. Right? Whereas the fatigue system will kick in before you crash. Yeah. But think about it. How on earth could police look at a technology that alerts to the onset of symptoms of fatigue before you get to the point where you drop out completely and run into somebody or off the road? How could they possibly look at that and see it as a bad thing? I'm just gobsmacked at that attitude.
Well, the thing for me definitely was, continue with the Seeing Eye, but run it in conjunction with something capable of absolutely explaining what the driver has done, location.
So you at the time were relying on factory telematics in the truck and the Seeing machine, right? Yeah.
And so
but neither of them would probably be up with
not to the detail
a technology that you would get with like a Navman or a Hub Fleet or a Logmaster or something.
But we need to clarify that. Up until all of this occurred, even though Whiteline had the in-truck system that the manufacturer put in, and before they put Seeing Eye in, it was there, but Whiteline hadn't turned it on in terms of their access, and they weren't using it because they had no need for it at all. Right. So it wasn't until everything blew up with the police prohibition notice that the pressure came on to part of the condition of getting the rigs back on the road was to start using that technology that was in the truck to check work diaries. And within days, Sharon proved to herself that that technology wasn't up to it. And yet the police were relying on it to establish that there were problems when their House of Cards case really fell apart because they were relying on crap interpretation of crap data from a system not designed for that purpose. But Sharon put a really good empty data system in and now uses that comprehensively. And I've heard her say to operators, if you're going to have GPS in your truck, make sure it's a good one that is reliable with high integrity, that's not open to misinterpretation.
Right.
Because when there's an investigation happening, 15-minute breaks and 30-minute breaks are a very important part of that investigation. And so the system that was in the truck wasn't able to identify all of the breaks. And we know that because we compared MT data. We had a period of a few months where we were able to compare MT data to the other technology.
Right.
And we could see all the anomalies. There was one particular trip where there was 20 different breaks that the driver took that were not on the other technology,
and that's because
that were on the MT data.
Depending on the system and how frequently it polls and gets a ping from the satellites, if it's doing that every second or every 30 seconds, you get pretty what they call granular detail, pretty detailed. But if it's only pinging every 8 or 9 minutes, it can't tell you with any accuracy when a 15-minute break started or when it finished, right? And it can miss them completely.
And there's lots of other advantages of MT data anyway. Things like, police perception about how long a short rest break takes. Well, you're able to show on MT data from the moment the truck slows down to when it stops to when it gets going again and gets back up to 100. You're able to prove the time frame, that takes. You're able to prove when a truck is stopped and whether the driver is fueling or not fueling. You're able to isolate how all that happens.
Yeah, right.
I can remember someone from the public ringing, complaining about seemingly one of my trucks in the Adelaide Hills, and was definitely one of mine, they said. So we initiated an investigation into it. And when we had a look, it was a company with very similar initials to us, but through MT data we were able to establish that none of our trucks were anywhere in that area at the time, and so we were able to provide all that data. We had a driver at one stage, a lady went to the police and said that our driver was harassing her and her learner driver son that was learning to drive, said that they were doing 100 and that the truck was sitting right on its tail and looking to overtake and basically intimidating. Well, we looked at the MT data and we could see the behaviour of the truck in the location that this was all meant to have happened, and it was nowhere near 100 kilometres an hour. And then apparently the police went and looked at the calibration of the car, and the car was 10 kilometres out of calibration with its speedo.
Yep.
Yep.
So MT data has or a telematics,
a good high-grade
telematics
Yep.
like MT data. There's others around.
Yep.
But I chose MT data, but it helps you in all sorts of situations. And I think what all of that taught me was that you can't afford to not have all the protections in place. Even if it doesn't deliver a greater safety outcome, you have got to have those protections in place that you're able to substantiate what your operation's actually doing. So for the ones that care about that, that's obviously, a lot more expense, a lot more checking, because obviously all this stuff has to be checked. Which again, we've talked about sham contracting. There's sham contractors that wouldn't even worry about any of that stuff, but those of us trying to get it right, we've got all these additional costs, the monthly monitoring fees, employing someone to analyse all of that information, report on it. So it is a huge overhead, but in this day and age, you can't afford to not have it.
You've got to fight fire with fire when it comes to the authorities and have everything electronic as they do.
Yeah.
And you've got to understand how the system you're thinking about purchasing works. some of them, you put the key in the ignition and their system will start recording a trip. You haven't moved, but you've put the key in the ignition. Right now, and our friends in blue uniform didn't understand that. So they were saying trips were commencing before they actually commenced and finished after they actually finished. All those little things matter, and you've got to understand it. And I think the telemetry providers now are aware of the exposure, not just for truck operators, but themselves. And I suspect they're going to get better and better at working with truck operators to give you a system that meets your needs and doesn't expose either the telemetry provider or the operator to an issue. But the simple best answer is purchase and implement, if you're serious about it, a system that's been certified.
Yeah.
Because that's got the level of integrity that you need. And then keep your eye on the data. Don't just ignore it and say, I'll pull it out if ever I get charged with anything, because it might be telling you about problems that you really need to know about.
This is where people have to understand the importance of things like checking work diaries, but actually comparing them. They tell you to do it.
Yes.
Compare them against the tracker, compare them against his system, compare them against fuel, and make sure the driver is being legit in what he's putting down, because you can find that out pretty easily. But the last thing you want is an investigator to come in, follow it an incident, and them to find it out, because that's finding out the hard way.
Yeah.
Well, you know, and it's fine for people to say if they have an incident, they'll just get rid of stuff. But what you've got to remember is all this stuff gets stored at a central location, you know, so there's absolutely no point in doing any of that. And being on top of all your record keeping and making sure that you do dot all your I's and cross your T's, because you just don't know when you're going to need it. And
your record keeping, Sharon, is next level. Like when I came and visited you down there at your depot, and I've gone into a lot of companies over the last nearly 14 years of doing this, plus other companies I've worked with. I've never seen anyone that's had records kept the way you did, and that wasn't something you'd suddenly done. That's been like that forever. Yeah. And I couldn't believe that was just transparency to me.
Yeah.
And it was filed, it was documented, everything was there. I was blown away.
Yeah.
And I've never seen anyone come even close to what you did with the amount of records that you'd retained in there, which surprised me so much when I knew what you'd been through, because I'm thinking it's all there.
Yeah, well, the police, when they marched through the door on the day of the actual raid, they actually herded my team into a room, because they said that we could be putting insecticide on our records and shredding them. So it was like, just tell me what you want and I'll direct you to where everything is.
Yeah.
And incidentally, we don't have any of the original stuff back. They've still got all that 5 years on. So,
really?
Yeah.
They're not very good.
I'm going to ask why. Do you know why?
No, I don't know why, and over time I had to keep asking for photocopies of various things, because, you know, when in that time frame when I was having an audit, I needed a lot of my trip records and a lot of my NCRs, you know, like all my reporting. I needed all of that to present to the auditor. So
and the cops got a bit toey about that, didn't they? You had to use the lawyer to make the point to them that it was needed. They have legal obligations, and so does the regulator, about how they have to be a model litigant. That means they have to deal with you fairly and professionally. Sure, they might be taking you through court, but they can't treat you like crap. And they're even supposed to treat you well even when you're a bit of a nerd yourself.
Yeah.
But Bruce, it is really disappointing to see how much effort very highly trained and qualified lawyers had to put in to extract through the court a whole bunch of material and evidence. And when stuff was provided, there were chunks missing, and it wasn't provided in a way that was intended to help. It was just a big pile of stuff, right? Well, I don't think that's being a model litigant. If they want to charge you with stuff and they reckon they've got evidence, and when your lawyers ask for it, they should say, certainly, Mr. Shearer, here you are, here it is. And it doesn't give you any confidence that they actually know what they're doing when they can't do that. So they're either being incompetent or they're being mischievous, either of which is unacceptable in my view.
Yeah, and I think when I go back to when we went to the Supreme Court and had a stay with the prohibition notice, we attended a very highbrow meeting in the City of Police, and we undertook to satisfy some of the criteria that they were asking for. And to this day, I've still not met with anyone from the police to talk to them about it. As soon as I realised that there was a problem with the GPS that they wanted me to go live with, I reached out because I wanted to tell them, look, are you aware this GPS doesn't do what you think it's going to do? That's not going to work. But now in hindsight, I think about it and I realise that meeting was never really about, it was never genuine because there was all this other work going on anyway.
Yep. So the police had just read the writing on the wall in the Supreme Court that at the next hearing they were more than likely going to have the prohibition notice quashed, so overturned. The judge stayed it, which put it on hold, and that meeting Sharon's just talked about was to discuss how to resolve it, and the police were clearly keen to withdraw so they wouldn't have the embarrassment of the court overruling them. And they said, yeah, look, we're happy for the trucks to go back on the road if you do this, this and this. And even though it seemed pretty obvious to us that what they were talking about really was just so much crap, but part of that, I distinctly remember them saying that they would come and visit you in a few months' time and see how you're going. Never happened.
And
never happened.
We actually wrote and invited that because I reckon it was July of 22, one of the very same police officers involved in that initial investigation intercepted one of our trucks at Ceduna, grounded it for 8 hours, and wrote all over this driver's work diary, said that he was lying about all his entries and that he was looking at the cameras. So that driver contacted us from Ceduna. We immediately got on to MT Data, and guess what? The police were, every entry that he made on his work diary was out 1.5 hours, exactly the time zone difference between Adelaide and Perth at that time. And
what a shambles.
The truck sat there for 8 hours, which then impacted that driver, then impacted the other drivers that were continuing the journey then. So at that point, when we could see that it was still getting done wrong and calculated wrong, we again wrote to senior police and asked for a meeting. Please come and have a look at our systems. We want to show you how we manage all of this. And they wouldn't come.
We even had, in relation to that, we had serious discussions with the Department of Infrastructure and Transport in South Australia because they manage the safety cam system in South Australia. And we were asking questions like, well, how is the data recorded? Where does the time zone stamp come from, and so on? And the answer we got was all of the safety cam data is generated in Greenwich Mean Time. All of it, right across the country. Therefore, somebody in either the police or the NHVR or both, but I think it was in police, convert that to what they think is the appropriate time zone. And they got it wrong, right? So, it's Keystone Cops.
The sad thing about all of it was, we've been going since 1977, never had anything like that ever that we'd been involved in. And I wasn't trying to hide anything. I wasn't trying to run. I was asking for engagement. Talk to me. And no one would. So that was the hard bit. So I guess what I say to anyone listening to this is that you have to be prepared for a rainy day. You have to make sure that you've got all the information that you need to support everything about how you function and operate, because you just don't know, unfortunately, when, you know, you might need it. And it's no good saying, well, I'll just get a legal team to help me if that happens. The legal team can only go to bat for you based on the information that you provide them.
Yep.
So you have to be invested in arming them with what they need to represent you. So on that point, for me and another staff member, that was probably 18 months of just digging in.
Wow.
And putting together.
And it's not like you were sitting around looking for something to do. You guys are on the pump all the time.
No, they were elbows deep inside the office, analysing, and I did some, but they did the mountain of it, analysing everything in detail, and you know, compiling the evidence and the explanation, and then educating the lawyers about the operational realities and the consequence of this or that. The lawyers are good lawyers, and Sharon used very good lawyers, but you need to help them understand all those factual realities, right? Because they can't argue the case without it. And of course, along the way of doing it, if you actually convince your lawyer who was prepared to defend you anyway, but prove unequivocally to them that you absolutely did not do what you're being charged with, well, guess what? They love it. They really fire up and go, right, you know, we are absolutely committed to defending you.
Yeah, right.
In circumstances like that, you need your lawyers to be totally invested in defending you 100%, not just a good defence, the best defence that they can. And a large part of that falls back on you as the operator, being able to present that info and explain it in detail.
How many trucks did you have on the road at the time, Shaz?
I reckon we had about 30 at the time. Yeah.
That's and mainly road trains, or were they a bit of a mixture?
Road, everything to Perth is road trains and B triples and B double work to Melbourne. So, yeah.
And I know you said that your drivers got hassled a fair bit, enough to the point that you had a number of them leave. And what about mechanics and that type of thing? Did they get?
We had a long-term mechanic leave that had been with us for 10 years because he was really scared that, you know, we weren't going to be there anymore and all his entitlements and all that kind of thing he might lose. So, it had huge impact. And some of the guys that left, you know, they had police telling them, you're too old, stay over the WA side, don't come into SA. You know, got quite personal with them.
You know, it sounds very similar to what I heard about Coots. When Coots had the accident at Mona Vale. And I've heard a lot. You know, we got a bit involved at one stage there with a client who was buying a lot of their trucks and talking to a lot of the guys from Coots and drivers about getting pulled over and getting pestered on the side of the road. And it's like they just wanted to make an example there. There was just a witch hunt.
And they will lean on individuals and they will spot. So they approached me to interview me, and I didn't look nervous and worried at all. I was pissed off, but they could see I wasn't going to fold. Some of the drivers they approached, they would have seen the same thing. Some other drivers they approached, they would have seen that driver's vulnerable. And one driver was actually unwell, as I recall, and heavily stressed out. And the way the police interacted with him was absolutely inexcusable. But they're looking for the weak link.
Yeah.
They're looking for somebody who they can prevail upon.
Who will break.
Yeah, and look, just give us the dirt. Just, you know, just tell us. We just want one of you bastards to tell us that Sharon's pushing you. None of them did, right? But it didn't stop the cops thinking it and saying it on body cam, showing their bias. You know, the bias that Darryl Foyle talked about in his email. It's I am, even though it's not my company, I am deeply offended and angry at the unprofessional behaviour of too many of those officers and the failure of the South Australian Police Department to properly manage. They've got an important job to do, but they must do it with honesty and integrity and fairness. I don't think any of that applied in the Whiteline case. It was abysmal.
So Sharon, as a result of this, what have you done to come out the other end and to retain your sanity, I suppose, when it comes to education? I have seen you get up and speak at a few functions,
Yeah.
and to help other companies that have been through this.
Yeah, look, so for Bob and I, this has been our life. So obviously what the events that occurred really knocked us around for sure. But then, when you can see the results and you come out the other end of it, it becomes about rebuilding. And I guess I had so many phone calls from other operators. I had a lot of people, some were in similar situations, some hadn't experienced anything like that, but were really scared about what could happen. So, yeah, it's been about spreading the word and just trying to tell everyone all these extra things that you should have in place. Don't wait for something to go wrong to put it in place.
It's all irrelevant after the fact, isn't it?
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's been easy. I'd say that, when all our troubles were going on, we missed out on so many milestones in life that we'll never get back. I definitely think it really had a toll on both our health. Bob's in his 82nd year this year, so and it definitely impacted myself mentally. I had one side of my brain talking to the other side of my brain kind of thing. But now, like I say, with all these other systems, whilst they might not be delivering greater safety outcomes, they certainly do deliver peace of mind that if we're unlucky enough, and let's face it, all of us out on the road, we do millions of kilometres every year. We're interacting with lots of other road users and weather conditions, lots of situations come up that you can't plan for. So, it's inevitable, unfortunately, with the kilometres we all do, that at some point there's going to be something go wrong. So it's what can I do when and if that happens? And that's my greatest advice to people.
Yeah, and we've also tried to make changes to the system, unsuccessfully so far, but we took a step that we don't think anyone else has ever tried. We asked for and eventually got, after leaning on the South Australian Premier, and he passed it to, as we expected, to the Police Minister and Transport Minister. We made it pretty clear that we thought there were serious issues that need to be discussed and about the way SAPOL operates and handled it. There was some, and so we had a meeting on the 14th of October last year, and Sharon and I went through the issues, and we suggested changes so that a senior sergeant or any sergeant shouldn't be empowered. They shouldn't have the authority to issue a prohibition notice and shut down a company. We argued that it should be a judicial officer, so a judge, right? We expected they'd come back and say, bugger off, we might make it a commissioned officer, right? We also suggested that they should put in place arrangements so that no police officer can undertake GPS analysis as part of an investigation in relation to criminal matters. And these were criminal charges. They weren't just pissy little things. It was criminal charges being levelled against Whiteline and all of its drivers. And if you're going to have a copper doing analysis for that, we believe that that police officer should have been formally trained and appropriately qualified in GPS analysis. Because if the officers who did the work had been properly qualified, they would have seen all the holes in everything they were trying to stitch together and they would have said, well, this isn't going to help us because it doesn't stack up. Now, I'm willing to bet the cost to the South Australian Police Department for their overall investigation analysis would have been $1.5 million easily.
Wow.
With all the officers that they had involved and in chasing down drivers and getting out on the road and harassing people.
And you look at the irony here, where you're saying that they should be formally trained, which I fully agree with, but we've got to have training in place in transport down to the finest details. And yet they're going out and issuing fines and stuff that's not. And this is something that we hear a lot of, you know.
Yeah.
It's, look, I'm not in here to bash the regulator or the coppers or anything. Well, we made it very clear at the beginning that some of the stuff that they see would be horrible. But I think in this case, they made a major screw up. And they probably need to cop it on the chin, at least come and say, hey, we're sorry, we fucked up. You know, like in a nutshell. They probably need to give you a glass of red or something as well to help
Shiraz.
you. Yeah, Shiraz, sorry.
I just want a working relationship with them all. There are things going on, and it would be great, you know, like once upon a time at a lot of our conferences, we used to have the police come and they would do a presentation on the sorts of things that they're seeing on the highway, which was really educational for everybody that would go. Sometimes if you have got a problem with a driver, it's good if you can call on an authority to come and talk to that driver and say, hey, listen, this is what your employer's telling you. What they're telling you is actually right and for all these reasons. And also, you know, there's new cadets coming through the police force all the time, you know, understand about what trucks do, the technology, typically how a truck driver, you know, does what he does, and have a bit of an understanding of some of the lingo and the way that businesses function. Just all of those kind of things would be industry working together, not in a way that compromises the authority of the police, but enhances the information sharing so that we can be better, they can be better, and what's more, we deliver safety, and you know, and isn't that what we're trying to achieve here? I just want to say something else about the technology too, to bear in mind for people that are considering it. Where the aerials are, the type of aerials, the installations, the wiring, all of these kind of things you'll find out if you've gone through something like I've gone through is really, really critical.
You can have a really good system, but they put the aerial in the wrong spot. You don't get the quality out of the system.
Especially depending where we go. I can remember Ian Phillips, who was selling us the MT data at the time. His words to me were, Sharon, you are going to need kick-ass antennas, otherwise we won't guarantee the data or anything that comes out of the systems. So I said, whatever you got to do, and that meant holes in the trucks and, you know, whereas the other technology, it's all in the truck, under the dash and internal, you know. So so you do a bit of a crash course on all this stuff and learn a lot. Steve and Chris Koniditsiotis, who was with TCA as their CEO for many years, have put together a bit of a guide, which has got a lot of really useful information in it for people considering.
Freely available on the SARTA website, so the telemetry guide. So
excellent.
I remember when I was looking at telemetry, you know, and this obviously it's over 5 years ago now, it was really, really difficult to navigate, working out what does what, where it fits in, and now there's so many combined systems where you can get the fatigue and the GPS as one unit. Like, you need to think about what you're trying to achieve, what reports you want,
what do you
and
need
really
out of
look
it?
at the
we'll see
systems.
people go and buy a system. I know we've grabbed one and they just went and got the very first one that they looked at. Yeah, and that doesn't work. You know, they've got to have a look at what their business does and how it works. And
or they've saved a bit of money and not bought that one, they've bought a lower level one.
Well, that's always a downfall. I mean, you get what you pay for. And and in this day and age, the technology is there, and you've got to get someone who's going to constantly improve that technology as well, not just sit on their hands. We have seen some systems that were 5 years ago were the best system you could hope for, which now have fallen behind.
Yes. Yeah.
So all of that's relevant as well.
In reflection, I'm pretty sad about what happened. Like from going from 1977 to having that happen in 2020, it was like that was a long career for myself and Bob and our team to have had. And then, the events happened. And I don't know that you ever really get over it, but the whole point is you've got to get on with life, don't you? I mean, life goes on. So
You do, and it's just like the bit that I think is sad is that some people go out and leave themselves wide open to this type of thing and prosecution or getting arrested or going to jail or whatever, and they're just scumbags.
Yep.
But when you're out there and you're trying to make a living and you're getting treated as a criminal by having trucks, and this is the point that we make to everybody who we go into, is like the amount of different situations that we've seen. It's anybody. It's anybody. We've got people that are friends of ours that are going through particular stuff there that you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. And it's really sad to think how easily it can happen, and people have to be aware in this industry, you risk losing everything in this industry. And you risk getting pulled through it. So everyone's talking about, and with Paul Osbury, we'll be talking about risk-based systems and all that type of stuff, which is what's going to be coming in. But the initial risk is having a frigging transport company.
That's right.
Is having trucks.
Yep.
And relying on the human factor of just an individual driver coming in and doing the job right.
Well, and then remembering that you're on roads that are also occupied by hundreds of thousands of motorists, some of whom are moronic and have no understanding of trucking, and will jump out in front of you and do all sorts of things, not realising you haven't got room to brake or manoeuvre around them. I think the biggest single risk for all those operators out there thinking, no, we're right, nothing ever happens, we're pretty good, look at our record. Tomorrow, you could have someone in a car or on a motorbike do the wrong thing in front, get themselves killed by one of your trucks, and the authorities will be all over you like a dose of salts.
Steve, we've seen people who have had members of the public run out and suicide underneath the front of the truck.
Yes.
The truck's doing nothing wrong, and the company gets pulled through the ringer.
Yes.
So the sooner people don't have their head buried in the sand with this and look and go, okay, what do we need to do to lift ourselves? Because if that happens, that can happen to anybody.
Yep.
And if that happens, it's a game changer to you, your life, your business, your driver who hops out and sees someone splattered on the road. Literally, I mean, there's some horrible stuff there. You talked about Sharon running into a camel. You had a damage that did to a truck, but also the mess. Imagine that mess being a human being. We're not trained for that.
No.
So
the authorities are trained for that, and they all break.
in South Australia, we continue to make efforts, and we thought we were getting somewhere a year and a half ago. We were saying to the government, suicide by truck, bus or train is far more common than is recognised.
Yes.
The authorities know it. And I started to take advantage of the fact as soon as I realised it, that for the Department of Infrastructure and Transport, and they're responsible for buses and trains, they are very aware that they've got a lot of employees who are exposed. So I talked it up not just being about suicide by truck, but suicide by truck, bus or train. And there was, and I need to check the new ministerial allocations as of yesterday, but there was an assistant the Premier's representative on suicide prevention, Nadia Clancy, who's now a minister as of yesterday. And I met with her several times, and the conversation we were wanting to have is, look, this is a problem. In the old days, everybody would say, no, we're not going to talk about it because of the copycat syndrome. And that was called, it had a name, the Werther principle, that if you talk about it, people who are thinking about it will suddenly go and do it, right? Psychologists now recognise, and there's a lot of evidence, that there is an effect called the Papagiano effect, which is the opposite. So somebody suicides by truck, just for argument's sake, a fatality is reported on the news with maybe a bit of footage, but they won't mention that it was suicide. Well, there's an alternative, which is to talk about it in a way that reaches out to people who are contemplating suicide to get them to do something that's really important. Think about the impact you will have on the truck driver if you choose to use their truck as your way out of this place. And it's been proven to work. And I thought we'd been with a fair chance to get government on side. They've all pulled their heads in. They're worried about it. So I'm now trying to get media interested so that every time they run a story that's like that, and you see it now and again, they'll run a banner that says, you know, if you're having issues or you know someone who is, reach out to, you know, one of these services. We ought to do that because the impact on the truck drivers, who are the innocent victims, is lifelong. And who's looking after them? We're trying to, and we're trying to get governments to get involved in an active program that A, helps prepare truck drivers for that possibility so that when it happens, they're better able to cope. B, when it happens, support them through the aftermath. And C, hopefully, reach out to people with suicidal ideations and discourage them from doing it. Or if they're going to do it, don't do it with a truck, bus or train.
Yeah, it's a hard thing. I'm being extremely open here, but I nearly have once before. It wasn't planned, and I talking to psychologists and a psychiatrist I've been seeing about it because it becomes a chemical imbalance, and it was caused through chronic pain, and eventually a snap.
Yeah.
When you have that snap, you don't think of anybody around you. It's like I remember saying to my psychologist, it was like I was looking down the barrel of a gun and everything around me didn't matter. And he said to me, you either failed or you were disturbed. And I said I was disturbed. And when I explained to him exactly what I saw at the time, and because I mentioned that the blinkers came off when I was disturbed, the blinkers came off, I said, and I could see everything. Again, he came up and put his hand on my shoulder. He said, you are very, very lucky to have survived. Because he said that's a point of no return. So the hard thing is then that you're not thinking about anyone. But on the other hand, I have had it happen where the second time, which was last year, I hate to say, and I got to a point where I couldn't cope. And that was when you really feel like a failure, that it wasn't a snap, it was just, I just can't do this anymore, I've just had enough. And my psychologist talking to him about it, saying this is what happens to emergency services people and people who are in the Defence Force and whatever, where they plan it and they say they can't cope anymore and they set everything up and they do it. And that was a time where I was thinking, I can't impact anybody else. And then you start thinking, oh no, but I'm going to impact my family. And then you go down and then up and down and up and down and up until you fall asleep out of exhaustion. It's not the most pleasant thing to happen. I talk about it openly because I just think if me talking about it helps one person to talk to someone, it's worth it.
We need to talk
but it's
about
a horrible, it's a horrible way to be.
And
it's a horrible state of mind. I'm in a really, really good place now, and I've been seeking a lot of help, but I've struggled for a long time. I struggled since my car accident in on December the 30th, 21. I've struggled very, very heavily since then, but I'm going pretty good now. But I've made it my mission to try and help people because it can get a hold of you, and something gets a hold of that mind. And I can see, Shaz, that you've probably been through a similar thing like that as well, where it just grabs a hold of you. It's so hard getting your mind back and taking control of your mind again.
Well, I can remember multiple times sitting in my car just sobbing uncontrollably. One stage Bob was in hospital and it was about 9 o'clock at night, and there'd been a day of, you know, dealing with everything and then going to the hospital and just sitting in the car thinking, well, for want of a better word, this is fucked. How am I ever going to, how's this ever going to resolve? It just, because some things are just about taking time. It takes time as everything goes through a process. And sometimes you're not interested in time. You just want to deal with it head on, confront it and fix it and finish it. And sort of having it hanging around over your head for a long period of time that's part of the torture, to be honest. And then I think you jump at shadows. You know, people, by and large, the support of people was amazing, but there were some people I think that are probably too scared to talk to you because if they talk to you, they think that the authorities might implicate them in something or
I would guess that you probably lost some friends through this as well.
that were unsure, but I gained a lot too, you know. So
probably didn't realise how much support you actually had.
yeah, but people are very, very cautious about demonstrating that too publicly.
Yeah.
You know, when it's all happening, they keep a foot in both sides of the camp.
Yeah.
So you jump at shadows a bit. You know, it plays games with you for sure, and then you're trying to keep all your people happy and still run a business. You know, it's it's not an easy thing, and I guess to go from, you know, I mean, some people might say, well, geez, why didn't you have MT data and all the kind of that stuff beforehand, you know, and that might not have happened to you. But the whole point is I never had fines and I never had, you know what I mean? I just wasn't getting any kind of attention at all from the authorities, or my drivers weren't. There weren't the fines. There weren't.
You also would never have thought that a situation could be as savage as it was either.
Exactly.
What happened to you was unwarranted, but was really just something that we haven't seen before. And that's something you wouldn't have expected. So you're not that sort of person, and I don't think everyone else is going to be that type of person either. But
the reality is, Bruce, that they're still doing the same work the same way they were before.
Yep.
And the systems that the MT data system is proving that it's 100% kosher. There was not a problem. There wasn't a problem. And so even if Whiteline had that system in place, there was still a risk that the police would have had a crack, but at least they would have been looking at high-grade intel.
Well, it would have been a lot easier for us too,
Yes,
because we would have been able to get the reports a lot more readily. And that's the thing, you've got to make sure that you get these reports, because there's an endless plethora of reporting that you can get. So you've got to get the report that works for your operation. And I mean, and my operation really is pretty simple because they all do the same thing. I hate to think what it must be like for businesses where, you know, the pickup point changes all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Things change mid-trip. You know what I mean? Like there's some drivers that really rely on
it was like a bus
the scheduler,
really,
talking them and telling them, look, you know, today instead of going to Melbourne, you're going to be going to Brisbane because there's this load, that load. Like I don't even have the complexities of all the different locations and paddocks and silos and, you know, various locations that Mother Nature for a particular year, that's where a crop is yielding or that's where livestock is or something. I don't have that complication. My stuff is just simply depot to depot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if it was that hard for me, all of this, you know, that's what I'm saying. You know, you can't wait to have a problem to bring in some of these things. You need to be thinking about the driver and the truck every minute of the day. Can you account for what that truck and driver are doing for every single minute of the day?
Yeah, and that's what it boils down to. And I'm sure there's people listening to this going, golly, you know, that's pretty full on, but that's what it is. That's what we're trying to explain. There is one key message here, and that is that you've got to have telematics. You've got to be able to prove it. So this is going to be a way that you can prove that everything's happening the right way. But you've got to manage your telematics. You've got to have someone who can operate your telematics.
Yep.
And honestly, we go into places and we say, oh, can you give us a report on such and such? How do you do that?
Yeah.
Hey, learn it. They should be taught to spit reports out of that constantly on fatigue, on maintenance, on mass, on everything that they can. Idle times and how to read those reports. And that's what they need to be able to do. And then they should be managing it. So if a driver
Yes.
goes in and puts down that he started at 5 a.m, but he's kicked the truck in the guts at 4:40 because he was there early,
Yep.
mate, you can't do that because that's regarded as work.
Yes, that's
So
right.
you've just lost 15 minutes there,
Yep.
as that should be your pre-trip inspection. But
Yep.
what the driver can do starting early, and companies say, oh no, just start whenever you want, but you've got to be on site at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
Driver can't sleep, comes in at 3 a.m, I'll just get out there, be ahead of the queue, but he can actually breach and break his 7-hour break. And
Absolutely.
just see that sort of stuff. That's basic stuff, but we see that a lot.
All
Yep.
sorts of stuff, and there's something for the users of the telemetry system in a trucking company to be very aware of, and the owners and managers need to be aware of it. With some of the systems, they'll do an update and change terms and conditions in a way that changes the commercial arrangement if you're not careful, or some other issue. And it's like when you open a lot of software programs, and it you have to sign off on the change conditions, and most people just go, yeah, tick, whatever, and they never read it.
Yeah.
Well, we've become aware that there are things that have been changed, including signing off in relation to the provision of your data to the authorities, right? And whether or not you get advised. People need to understand that they shouldn't just, right, I'm opening up the telemetry, oh shit, I'll get rid of this message, I'll just go tick. They might be agreeing to things that the bosses actually need to be involved in deciding,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because it can
Those
have...
terms and conditions, as
Yeah.
long as they are, should be read.
Yeah, which a user or a worker just wanting to use it to perform their normal
Won't
duties
care
on a
about,
day,
yeah, yeah.
they wouldn't even
Yeah.
consider
Yeah.
that. It was like, just get rid of that off my screen. I want to get to the next
Yes.
bit
And
and do my
another thing
work.
we're seeing more and more when we see a notice come in is job descriptions. And can we see the job description of that particular employee there? And we'll talk to the employee and he's going, oh, no, I don't have anything to do with that. And then you look at his job description, second line, there it is.
Yeah.
And mate, you actually do have that as part of your role, and they didn't even realise.
Yeah.
Job descriptions are incredibly important because they will get pulled by the regulator or any other authority under an investigation. Is this your responsibility?
Yeah.
And people just don't realise. And mate, I remember when I finally got my first gig in management, I was excited. I felt really something. I'd gone out of driving. I'd always said when I was driving, I want to make a difference in road transport. And that way to do it was to climb. And I wanted to get out and I wanted to help the industry. And I was just driving a truck and I wanted to know that I was something. I wanted to join the board of Nat Road and all sorts of stuff there. And I just wanted to do it and make a difference. And the first gig I got was a transport manager role. And I remember getting my business cards and thinking how proud I was of getting that. And I got a company, a piece of shit that they gave me. But I was there and I was thinking, this is it. And I had no idea at the time of the implications that that title gave me.
Yeah. Yeah.
My goodness, I had a noose around my neck that I had no idea, and I look back at what that company was like, and I'm like, my goodness.
Yep.
And other companies that I've worked for as well, and the way that you get overridden on doing stuff, and the way that nothing was managed and monitored properly now.
Yep.
And here we are, and you know, I've often heard, I've had a lot of, I have got a lot of admiration for Ian Pendon. And Ian's been around for donkey's years, right? I was one of the first people that got into doing compliance work. And I chat with Ian a fair bit. And poor Ian lost his wife, Sue, just before Christmas. And I'd had a lot to do with him. I was doing training through Ian and Sue. And Ian has copped it. I've heard so many, I'm going to call them bogan truckies, turning around going, oh, he was breaking all these laws, now he's up us for breaking them. And he's not. He actually understands what you have to do. He's covering your backside. He's saving you in what you do. Don't turn around and ridicule someone who's saving you for what you do. And it's not everyone. Most people respect him for what he does.
Yep.
And but the thing is, he's out there doing it. And that's what anyone doing what you do, Steve, doing what we do. We're trying to help companies understand and get it through their heads that they've got to do it a certain way. But not all of them get it. And by the time they do, mate, if you've had the incident, don't bother calling us then. Can't do anything after the fact.
My attitude is, if they don't want my help, there's plenty of other people who do, so see you later.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, mine's ruder than that. I say I'd rather pick up dog shit in the backyard than try and talk them into doing what they're meant to be doing. So, similar but different. Same.
It's really hard, you know, when you are volunteering your time though.
Yeah.
And you become like, the police at one stage said that I put myself on a pedestal, whatever the terminology was, and it was like, If I could take back those decades of going to countless meetings and going to all those things and turning that into my private time and enjoyment time, I would have had a lot more fun and reward doing that than putting myself, you get...
That's pretty rich coming from them saying that to you when all you're doing is out there trying to help.
Yes.
I met you a long time ago, Sharon, and long before you knew who I was. And I first started going to conferences. The first one I went to was ATA in Adelaide, and it was probably 12 years ago. And I remember going down there and then going to different conferences, and I'd see you get up and speak. And I was in awe of the fact that he was a lady and you're extremely elegant, and I love that. But I also then found out that you drove road trains, and I'm thinking, oh, that's pretty damn cool, isn't it? And you're a bit of both, and you're a cracking singer as well. But you would come out there and you would get up and you would talk, and I was always in awe of anyone that would get up in front of those people and talk. I never knew I was going to be doing what I'm doing now for a living. But I was unfortunate that I met you properly the way that I did, and that was through the case that you'd been through, because when I did, I was thinking it doesn't seem like someone who's going to be out there cutting corners, and I realised that you weren't. But for them to say you're on a pedestal is a real kick in the guts for anybody, especially yourself.
It's petty
who's out
jealousy,
there just
isn't it?
trying to help. Yeah, it's just like
petty jealousy.
it falls into that tall poppy thing that we were talking about before.
Well, and we want young people in our industry to come through and move on to committees and boards and things like that to keep the message happening. But, quite honestly, if it puts a target on your back and you exposes you to this sort of thing, I mean, you'd have to think twice. I get it. But when you're young, you haven't got the chink in the armour. You know what I mean? You haven't undergone the battles. Your brain is, like you said, you're full of vigour and vim and positivity, enthusiasm. Then what happens is you get a chink and a kink and a chink and another chink and a kink, and you think, bloody Nora.
How many board members over all the years that you've been on the SARTA board, so you've been president for 13, but you're on the board before that, how many board members have you seen come onto the board and they were just like Bruce was describing, he wanted to get onto the board in that road. They get onto the board and they're all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I know what the issues are and I know how to fix it, and it'll all be done tomorrow. And then the grind of working with governments and getting things to happen starts to dawn on them.
Well, look at that. The trial that we did for road trains and triples, west and north of Port Augusta. Like in South Australia, the speed limit was 90. Everywhere else, it was 100. And that makes a dramatic difference to a driver's fatigue if he's got to drive all those kilometres, 10 kilometres less. And so, through SARTA and the government and ARB and Quinn Transport at Lincoln and Whiteline, we had two of our, or a B triple and a road train, two drivers. Bob went up, Quinn's had trucks there, Steve went up, the regulator were there, Bob went up, and we had the worst weather conditions of all time at Nundroo.
And they picked the worst bits of road on purpose.
Picked the worst bits of road, and the configurations had all the telemetry strapped on, and the whole idea was to prove in a report that the road trains and the triples at 100 Ks were as stable, if not more stable, than a road train or a triple at 90. Now, at that trial, delivered that outcome, and as a result of that, everybody that goes west and north of Port Augusta can do 100 kilometres an hour in South Australia. No one would understand, but that took us years to get that trial.
Yeah.
And make it happen.
The time, the cost of doing that, which obviously was done voluntarily.
Yeah.
But everyone benefited from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it even got sillier because at the time the minister was Pat Conlon, who's now on the board of the NHVR. And we had a couple of issues with Pat over the years, but we laugh about it now, we have a drink. But at the time, officials tried their last-ditch effort after the trial. We had another meeting with the minister and his senior engineers from the department. They said, look, Minister, here's the compliance data from the Colway system that shows it can detect that's a semi, that's a B-double, that's a road train. And here, look, this data shows that all the road trains are doing the same speed as the B-doubles and the few semis that are out there. So they're exceeding the speed limit by up to 10 kilometres an hour. So if you let them do 100, they'll do 110. Well, that's not even logical. And when they finished saying it, he looked at us and said, what do you got to say about that? And I said, well, that's not what that says to me. That says to me that what we've been telling you is right. The safe approach is for all the trucks to be doing the same speed, so you do not have B-doubles pulling out behind a road train and overtaking it, because they don't need to. And out there, they're managing it. Oh, and by the way, all the police are happy with that because they know it's happening. They're not booking anybody. So, in fact, our trial showed you scientifically that road trains are more dynamically stable at 100 than they are at 90. And this Colway data that your engineers have generously provided proves our case. And the Minister looked at the engineers and said, well, you stuffed that up, didn't you? And he gave us the 100 k's north and west of Port Augusta, right? But I mean, that's the sort of crap that again and again and again we've gone through over the years, isn't it? Mm-hmm. To get what we all know is right, accepted by government. Right?
Oh,
it's just difficult because I suppose, you know, they're all worried that they're going to have blood on their hands if it goes wrong.
Yeah,
I get it. People don't want to be the one responsible. And that's a problem because then that means we can't progress with anything we're trying to do, you know. So, you know, I think about the bravery really of Diana Laidlaw all those years ago to allow road trains to come south of Port Augusta.
That was huge.
To Lockhill.
Yeah.
That was a big call on her behalf.
Yeah.
And industry did the right thing and rewarded her efforts. And
we still haven't squashed a cat.
No. You know.
Oh, boy. All right. Well, look, we might leave it. We've got to get you back to the airport. Thanks so much for coming up, Sharon.
Thanks for having us.
For sitting down and explaining what you've done. Give us some great insight, as always. It's always a joy to sit down with you and have a chat. And Steve, I'll be seeing you tomorrow with Paul. Yep. So we'll sit down and we'll go through a few more things there with Paul Osbury and have a little bit of a chat with you in HVR. Yep. And we'll be gentle.
Yep.
We'll do our best to be gentle.
Yeah. And look, this is a great initiative, so good on you. Well done.
I really appreciate it. Thanks both of you for coming on the Missing Link.
Thanks, Bruce, and everyone hang in there, you know. Tough times, but hang in there.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Good on you.